This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reif Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I honestly, I don't know, I've been a part of so many of those this year, so it's nothing new to us. I was a little surprised it happened though. I'm not sure. And I was probably even more surprised how, they got put on the power play 6 times in a row. So we must have been, I guess, the aggressors, apparently.
How about Coop just taking a shot there,
Yes.
huh? We must have just been the aggressors.
Tongue firmly in cheek.
Oh,
There.
Frustration boiling over last night, there's no doubt.
I saw a clip. I don't know how this popped up. Remember George Brett?
I do
That was his first segue.
Brett.
I saw a clip, George Brett's final at bat. He got a base hit in his final at bat. But George Brett always had this huge wad in his cheek of like tobacco or whatever.
Right.
And that's Coop with
great.
the tongue in cheek, right?
Yes.
Like it was 5 in a row, just for the record. But his point is well taken. After the Anderson cross-check on Destu following an icing, every subsequent post-whistle scrum where there was an extra penalty given, every single one of them, the extra penalty went to the Lightning.
I don't know what to say about it. I don't like to complain about officiating because I think
it set the tone. It set
sets
part
the
of that
tone.
set the tone though for the first 2 periods where it was so much special teams play and the Lightning had to kill so many penalties. Agreed. Like that's probably not the top of the list talking point, but that's the clip we heard. So
the other thing too is that game took on a different level once they targeted Kucherov.
Yeah.
Now, I use the word targeted. You can use a different word if you want.
Maroon. This was a great game to have Maroon on the broadcast.
Did he want to fight yet? Was he coming out of the press box?
He was seeing things that, first of all, I miss a lot of the stuff that's away from the puck, but he was on top of a lot of stuff that happened. He was like, I like Anderson going after Kucherov. Like in his mind, he's like, that's what Anderson needs to do.
Right.
They need to let Kucherov know that if we see you in a playoff series, this is going to be tough sledding. And then, he was like, giddy is the wrong word, but he was very excited about Corey Perry engaging Lane Hutson. He's like, look at Perry going after Hutson. Like,
he loved it.
Yeah.
He loved it. And you know what, quite frankly, because you don't
But that was a response.
It was.
To what was happening with Anderson and Kucherov.
But you asked him, I think, that not many players would do what Perry did. And if you do something, it's usually somebody would go after Anderson. Right,
and
because
Carlisle did,
to his credit.
Right,
but you usually to go after the other team's best player.
One of them, yeah,
that's hard. You don't see that a lot.
Right,
and Perry was giving it to him.
Notice that Perry. I mean, I don't know if he was like eeny meeny miny mo, but he was a teammate of Suzuki and he was a teammate of Caulfield. He was a former Canadian.
Yeah.
He never played with Hutson, so I mean, I don't know if that was the reason he picked Hutson. Yeah, but. The reason that it is unusual, anybody can go up to Lane Hutson and talk tough, right? It's the reverberation of that. And so Jack-Eye then was ready to fight Corey Perry, and Maroon said right away, he's like, Corey Perry's not going to fight Jack-Eye. Usually, he's not going to fight Jack-Eye.
Why would he?
But he's like, we were watching, like Perry was motioning with a stick, and Maroon said, Perry is telling Jack-Eye, if you come to fight me, you're eating my stick, basically. Right. And I mean, way up top in the press box, that sort of stuff.
That was
a lot of it we miss, right?
That was great. Though.
That was really good
to
insight.
Well, and it's coming from somebody who a big part of his role was protecting teammates,
right?
So he gets that. And he even said, "Look, the Lightning have a few guys in the lineup who can go, but there aren't a ton of them. Corey Perry wasn't going to be one that was going to throw down with Jack-Eye." Or even Anderson. Why would he? I mean, you're giving up size.
I mean, he did fight McCarron.
He did.
In that recent game.
He did. He did.
The Lightning had with Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
Am I remembering that right? Okay.
No, you did. Yeah.
All these games are running together. So, I mean, it's not like he won't fight. But, I mean, Jack-Eye is in a different category. And Jack-Eye was like, stay away from Hutson.
Right.
Perry's like, okay, well, you guys stay away from Kucherov.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of this is table setting for a potential playoff matchup. in a week, and maybe the fans are like, why is this happening? Why are there so many whistles? Why are there so many penalties? Like, some of it is who's going to get the ice? Who's going to have space?
Yeah.
And both these teams, I think, are trying to say that your skill guys are not going to have an easy time of it. And, maybe that helps slow them down. Maybe that puts a seed of doubt in their mind. Who knows? This is a lot of the stuff that happens, though.
Right.
Players policing what is happening on the ice. That's why we saw so many post-whistle scrums. Now, let's get to the game. I thought for 2 periods, the Lightning looked flat as a pancake.
Yeah.
And look, I get it. The fans are like, they've lost 3 in a row. They've fallen into 3rd place.
How could you be flat against the Canadiens?
Well,
Come on,
so again, I think we do have a subset of fans who are just like, stay healthy. Last night, it was touch and go there for a bit. Gergensen's blocked a shot, and he finished the game. But the fact that he finished the game is a good sign, but he was hurt. That was Jack-Eye again. Jack-Eye ripped a one-timer, and Gergensen's blocked the shot and had to leave for a bit. And scary situation with Lilleberg, where Struble punched him when his cage came up.
Dirty.
Yeah, and when he was kind of in a defenseless position,
right,
and he had to leave for a bit, but he came right back. But it looked like he was shaken up. So both those guys finished the game. That's a good sign. The Lightning did not play a particularly inspired game in the first 2 periods, with the notable exception of 2 exceptions. They were engaged with a lot of the post-whistle stuff, and their penalty kill was off the charts great. If we had said before the game, Greg, and this is a very good Montreal power play. This is a good power play.
Yeah, it's got a lot of skill.
If we had said before the game, the Montreal Canadiens are getting 7 power plays, full power plays, 14 minutes. And the Canadiens for the game are only going to have 21 shots. We would be like, those 2 things don't jive, right?
Yeah.
You're giving Suzuki, Caulfield, Hudson, Demidov, Slafkovsky, that's their top unit, and they were out for most of those power plays. The 4-minute one at the beginning of the game, Marty had to, he couldn't keep them on the ice for 4 straight minutes. But they all played a lot of power play last night, which means they get a lot of touches. And if you think that was insignificant, if they meet in a playoff series, I think a night like that can help the Lightning's penalty kill. Because not only did they kill 7 penalties, they really shut it down. There really weren't. They had, I think, some chances on the first 2 that were back-to-back. After that, their power play was very quiet. Looking at the final sheet here. So, of their 21 shots, 9 were on the power play, but they had 7 power play opportunities. So, that part, and 6 were killed in the first 2 periods. They had 1 final one in the 3rd period. The 3rd period, the Lightning got engaged, and as we have said many times, particularly over this 7-game homestand, where the Lightning had some points in games where they weren't really emotionally involved, and then they got emotionally involved. That was when they were starting slowly, fell behind, got emotionally involved, and played better. The Lightning dictated play in the 3rd period. They got emotionally – I shouldn't say they got emotionally involved, because I think they were emotionally involved in the earlier 2 periods.
Right.
But it translated to much better play, and they dictated things in the 3rd period. They were the better team. They were the better team in terms of winning puck battles in the 3rd period. They only gave up 4 shots, but 3 of them, unfortunately, were grade A's. Vasi stopped the first 2, and then the one at the end of the game, which can get to what happened on that mistake. But the fans are worried, the Lightning just don't have it, right? How are they going to turn this around at, game 1 of the playoffs? We saw how the Lightning are capable of playing and dictating the terms of action just in the 3rd period last night. That was a game in which, they were very flat for the first 2 periods and had to kill a ton of penalties, and were kind of working with a shortened bench because they had a bunch of guys who were in the penalty box. They played the first half of the 3rd period with 3 defensemen in the penalty box.
Right.
Or 2 defensemen in the penalty box. They had a penalty kill where, was it Moser? Moser got the last penalty. Yeah. So that kill, they had 3 defensemen in the penalty box. Carlisle and Radish, though, were serving misconducts. So, they gamed it out. And when they are emotionally involved and invested, we see better play from them. Dobesh was really good, particularly during a Lightning power play, the final power play in the game. They had a few chances that were very dangerous, but then the Lightning got the goal on a. But I don't want to get into this like we're only talking about the positives, because the fans are like they're cherry picking what they're. But I mean, this was a part of the game, right? So the Lightning had a fairly late third period power play. That penalty on Demidov came with 5:38 left. So they basically had their top unit out there for the full 2 minutes. So now you got 3:38 left. You got to get Kucherov, Point, those guys off the ice. They can't just play the final 5.5 minutes straight.
Yeah.
So you have to rely on other guys. You're back to 5-on-5. So they had a unit. I want to say for sure Paul was out there. Gonçalves definitely. I can actually go back and look who the third forward was. I think Destu, who was on the ice when they actually scored the goal, was out there as well. They just won puck battle after puck battle after puck battle. And they had that puck in the Montreal end for an extended period of time, so long, in fact, that they decided to pull Vasilevsky as this unit was working the puck. And I mean, it wasn't like they just possessed it. They had to keep winning the puck battles to hold it in, which they did. And as Vasilevsky went to the bench, they got the extra attacker out there, but they also changed some players. So on the tying goal, they got Radish out there. They got Kucherov out there. They got Point out there. Perry was out there. I can't remember if Perry was out there previously or not, but probably not, because they probably wanted him on the 6-on-5. And Destu is down low in the corner. Destu wins a puck battle. Nudges it to Gonçalves, to Kucherov, to Radish. Radish bomb. Game tied. I mean, that may have been their best sequence of the entire night, and it got the game tied. Right. All right. So then they have the breakdown less than a minute later. And, like, there's no sugarcoating this. Like, if that happened in a playoff game, that would be a devastating mistake. But Suzuki is a very, very smart player. Suzuki's a terrific player. I mean, he's one of the best players in the NHL.
Yeah, he's a great
when
player.
he is on the ice, you have to be super aware of what you are doing in the defensive zone, or in any zone, actually. Suzuki dumps it in. It's a hard rim. It comes around from behind the net to, from my vantage point, the far side. Kucherov is there. Kucherov is in position. He stops it. He's got a Canadian bearing down on him, coming downhill. So he can't just he could try to chip it, but that Canadian might block it. So he does the right thing. He bumps it behind the net. You got Moser and Chernak there. Moser gets the puck and tries to tap it to Chernak, and that's when Suzuki stole it. And as we've often said, if you have a turnover, especially in the defensive zone, nobody is in the right position. They're in the position for where they need to be to get the puck out, not to defend a scoring chance. And Suzuki, great stick, intercepts. Nobody's in front for the Lightning. The two defensemen are behind the net. Kucherov's along the boards, and Slavkovsky slips in front. Suzuki gets him the puck. It's a one-timer right in the net. So the mistake was on Moser. I mean, the mistake was Moser. I asked Maroon, what would you have Moser do there? He's like, maybe hang on to the puck, don't try and just hurry it to Chernak. But hockey is a fast-moving game, and it was a mistake that was made at a critical time in an unfortunate place on the ice. And the Canadiens had their best players out there, and they made them pay for it.
It was tough on that play.
Coop said, we try that, we do that play 1,000 times, and
yeah,
this was the one time, maybe not the one time, but
it's a tough play for Moser, because I think Maroon's right. In that position, you probably want him to hold it, but what Suzuki did well on that play is that he forced Moser to, he couldn't go along the boards to chip that puck around the rim, because Suzuki was up against it.
Yeah.
So he forced him to either make that pass to try and get it over to Chernak, which the odds of that happening were very slim, or the second option would have been what Pat Maroon suggested. Eat the puck.
Yeah.
Hold it, and maybe
wait
you
for
take
support.
It's
easy to say with 2020
It's easy.
hindsight.
I mean, obviously, I'm not going to look. We dedicated a little bit of our show yesterday talking about Moser's metrics and how great he's been this year.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a mistake. It happened. It's unfortunate that it happened when it did. You typically don't see it. And I think what's more frustrating is that this happened not too long after the Lightning tied it.
Yeah.
And you're thinking they're going to get some points. And I know it's late in the year and they have a playoff position wrapped up. So does Montreal. So you're thinking, like, what does points really have to do with anything? They're still. It would have made you feel better going into overtime.
Yeah.
And that's
yeah,
hockey.
it would have been some good juju, I think. Yeah. But they still have time to get some good juju. And look, I'm going to be consistent. I really don't think it matters where they finish, and I don't think it matters the opponent. We may get some pushback from fans. I know we have some comments to the contrary, which I'm happy to address.
We do?
Yes. Well, I think this is coming from the one side of the aisle that is very concerned about the results. 3 regulation losses in a row. They've fallen out of first. Now they've fallen out of second. At this point, if the playoffs started today, the Lightning would be on the road to start a series. I'm going to be consistent. I think you've been consistent. We really don't think it matters that much. We had Andrew Chuck on the show yesterday, and he's like, you do want to be playing well going to the playoffs, but he's like, this team, he didn't know that it mattered as much for this team. We'll see. We can go back through the history books again and kind of detail how the Lightning have done wrapping up seasons and what it has meant, if anything, in the playoffs. But they are not locked into third. So, like, I don't want to say it's like the sky is falling, right? They fall into the third, they're going to be third. I mean, they do have 3 games left. If they make up 2 points on Montreal, they're going to be in second because they hold the tiebreak. So, had they lost the game in overtime, they'd still be in third last night. They would have to make up 1 point instead of 2. The Canadiens, they have 3 tough games. I will just point out down the stretch. By tough, I mean they're seeing 3 teams they're the 3 Metro teams that are in contention for third place. Those are Montreal's final 3 opponents. Home Columbus, at Islanders, at Flyers.
Right.
Now, maybe by the time they play at Flyers, this will all be settled. But there's no guarantee the Canadiens are going to go 3-0 down the stretch, or even 2-1. So let's see how this plays out. I mean, I thought that there was some good out of last night's game. If you want to look at team toughness, not backing down from what the Canadiens, and I do believe the Canadiens started it. I mean, Eric talked about that on the intermission. By Canadian starting, I'm really talking about Anderson, because he had on his to-do list, like, if we see these guys in a week and a half, I'm sending a message to Kucherov. Okay, message sent. Now there's a response rather than do nothing, right?
Sure.
So the Lightning had that part of their game, which I don't think was a bad thing. Yep. Their penalty kill was outstanding. And after 2 flat periods, they played quite well in the third period. So it's not like they're incapable of summoning the level of play that, is going to make them look better than how they have looked. On the flip side, they were back on their heels for the first 2 periods. They were outplayed for the entirety of the game. I think they gave up way more scoring chances than they generated themselves. And that's a continuation of what we've seen on this road trip. But this was game 79. This was not game 1 of the playoffs. And they still have 3 games left to try and get better. So that was my takeaway from last night.
Yeah.
The loss, giving up the goal late stings for sure. But I don't know. I mean, again, the result was the result. They're going to finish in first, second, or third. We know that. And if they finish in third and they have to start on the road going back to Montreal, if Buffalo maintains first place, do I think that the Lightning have no shot to win the series? Absolutely not. I think they can win the series. I think they get home ice and lose the series to any of these teams.
I think an interesting question for a lot of people to ponder as we head into the postseason is how much of the inconsistencies that we're seeing from the Lightning right now are it's the end of the year and you have a playoff
it's a fair question.
Position secured, and how much of it is do you think there is something that is more systemic? That there's actually issues with the team and they're being exposed.
So I think that it's not even an issue, but I think it's a puzzle piece that's going to need to get filled. and I keep coming back to this, the Pontus Holmberg injury is a huge blow.
Would agree with you.
Because you have your engine running smoothly, right? The engine's humming along, but maybe again, I don't know much about mechanics for car repair. So maybe I'm not saying the engine, but like the car is running, right? All the different pieces of the car make it go, and you're pulling out one piece, and this one piece may be kind of a small piece on the outside, but it's a very important piece. And this one piece greatly affects your one line that has provided a very specific role that has been crucially important. That, to me, is more significant than they had a flat game. I think you can have a flat game, and then the next game is not a flat game. I don't expect they're going to have a flat game in the playoffs. At least, game one of the playoffs, I don't think that the emotional level that they need to summon, that's going to be a problem. That's my opinion.
I
think a bigger question is, what is this new Gord line going to look like, and what is their role going to be?
So I think that is fair. I think the loss of Holmberg and what that does to the dynamic of the team in general, but specifically that Gord line, is going to be interesting because you may have to mix and match. Does it put more pressure on Anthony Cirelli's line to be more of a shutdown line? I don't know. Maybe you say, look, Yanni and Zemgus, regardless of who your other line mate will be, you are going to be that line that we go to shut down the other team's best line, assuming we can get that matchup. We know that can be a challenge at times. And who is that player? I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe the coaching staff has an idea. Do you start rolling it out more in these last 3 games to see if you can get in rhythm there? I don't know what the answer is to that question. I know it's a big loss, and I agree with you. I don't think the Lightning's play is going to bleed into what we see in the first round. If they lose in the first round, I think it's just going to be they ran into a better team. It's not going to be because I think the Lightning were just awful. I mean, that's an opinion, and we have no way of knowing. Mm-hmm. But I think that's kind of where we're coming down on some of these things. I will say the Declan Carlisle going right after Anderson. Mm-hmm. Declan Carlisle's not a fighter. We've seen that. I'm sure he got a lot of points in that locker room because he went after him.
Hung in there, like Anderson was throwing punches, but Carlisle kept his head away. So it looked like Anderson was a one-sided fight, and in terms of punches thrown, it was. But I'm not sure any of those Anderson punches, but they kind of hit him on the shoulder, basically.
And I think the fact that he's coming off the injury, and that's what he wanted to do, tells me that it's the exact opposite of what the Toronto Maple Leafs did.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It really is.
And this wasn't even like an injury. No. The Matthews situation was a dirty hit that led to an injury.
But I mean, it was like you touched Kucherov. Okay, here we go. And then that game, and I do think in the regular season you can have more of those games than something maybe in the playoffs, because in the playoffs you do understand it's about survival and moving on to the next round. So you don't want to lose your minds completely. Although there are times when we have seen series where it's a free for all.
Yeah,
I mean it is. We have seen series like that, but last night was a bit different. So let's get to some questions.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to dive into with that game? Injury-wise, where are we with everybody up to date? We know Hagel's still out.
Yeah, because we had a fan say, is everybody day-to-day? And I'm like, well, the guy's been out long-term or not day-to-day. Well, I was wrong about Carlisle. He was in, right? But I did give you guys the players that were out late. There was a little bit of, I don't know, gamesmanship is the right way to put it for
Coop. Was it Radish, right?
And
then he came back, right?
Well, Radish was not involved in line rushes.
Right.
Geeky was, but Geeky was out late.
Right.
So after watching the scratches, and they did turn out to be the scratches, we had Geeky, we had Sabourin, James, who's hurt, Crozier, who's coming back from injury, Santini is the extra defenseman. Those were the 5 guys that were out late with Johansson. So I'm kind of like, all right, is Geeky in? He was taking line rushes on a second line with Point and Gonsalves. It was Point, Gonsalves, and Geeky. And Radish just didn't even take line rushes. They had Moser with Carlisle. So, the building always tracks the line charts. We got a line chart from Montreal, and it had Radish out. The original roster report had Radish out, but that was not an official report. They were just basing it on watching warmups, but Radish was in. So they did go 11-7. Right. So that was good news for Carlisle. I think the fact that Crozier is skating and he's been practicing is a very good sign. Same with James. Like, these are very, very good signs.
Great signs.
Really, the one player right now that we know is going to be out, based on everything we've heard long term, is Pontus Holmberg. Hagel came out at the end of practice yesterday and got some work in, and Coop said not tonight, but hopefully by the end of the regular season. You know what? Let me just bring one thing up.
Okay, go ahead.
Before we get to questions. So the power play had 4 chances. When everybody was available and not in the penalty box, they had Perry as the fifth guy.
Yes.
So they had Perry in the bumper, and they moved Point to the left faceoff circle. Point is just more dangerous than the bumper. He is. I mean, there's a reason why Braden Point is usually in the bumper, and they've had Bjorkstrand at the left circle. They've had Hagel at the left circle. They've had different players at the left circle. They're not going to put Perry at the left circle, though. Perry is going net front. So they move Point to the left circle. I thought the power play was off in the first couple that they had. They had one early in the second that was a little bit better, and then the one they had in the third period was very good.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, what's going on here? Bjorkstrand was basically not used except one power play. Perry was in the penalty box. It actually might have been the third period power play. Although I don't see Perry. Oh, it was the second period power play. Perry was in the box for that one. Here's my point. When Brandon Hagel comes back, Brandon Hagel will be on that top unit if it's not Bjorkstrand. So if people are like, what are they doing with Point? What's going on with the power play? Like, I think when Hagel comes back, Hagel will go to the left circle where he's been for at least a portion of the season. Point's going to go back to the bumper. Now, of course, I'm assuming Hagel is going to come back for the start of the playoffs, but all signs point to that being the case. And you could have Bjorkstrand out there too, but it seems like he's kind of lost his spot on that first unit for now.
I feel for Bjorkstrand. I do, because
he mixed it up last night.
Yeah, you can tell he's just trying to find a way to get himself going. Whether it's mixing it up with a Malkin, not too long ago, and last night jumping in with his teammates. But, I mean, he, ultimately, I think, partner, when you're a goal scorer and you don't score goals, that has an effect on you. And I think it just hasn't, for whatever reason, this year, it just hasn't clicked. And sometimes that does happen. It's just a shame it's happening right now. Can that turn around in the postseason? It would be interesting. And I don't know if he would be a guy that would perform well in that role with Girgensons and Gord. But I almost wonder if you go to him and you say, forget about what happened in the regular season. This is your role. This is what we need you to do. Go out and do it. If that can shift his mindset.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, the goals will come. We need you to back check and defend. And if you do that, you're going to help us win.
Well, they have him on that line.
Right. Does it stay, though? Because the playoffs, that can be a different animal. Because everything gets magnified. But maybe that's a way to get him engaged even more. And when I say engaged, it's not like he's tanking it or he's dogging it. He's not. You can just see it's a guy who, his confidence, he's used to scoring goals. And when you don't have that, you feel a little lost. Like, what am I doing? So it's just maybe for him, that's the reset that we talk about. So let's get into some questions.
Yeah.
We have a few here, and I'm surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised. Social media is what it is. You've heard me talk about it over and over again. There are people who are just going to perseverate on the fact that you and I really don't, and Eric Erlinson, I think, is in that same boat, don't feel like these games are going to matter a ton in terms of the results we see in the first round. But there are a lot of people.
We may be proven wrong.
We may.
I think we do not have a crystal ball. But
we may be proven wrong, but I think if we are proven wrong, it's just going to be that we think the Lightning's play is going to elevate, and if they lose, it's just going to be to a better team. I mean, that's okay to say.
Yeah.
Anthony says, in all 3 games, the team was tied or down just 1 goal going into the third. They're giving themselves a chance against these top playoff teams, but need to start and finish the game stronger. The power play needs some mojo, being 1 for 27 in the last 8 games when it could make the difference, and I'd like them to start Saturday with the lead. Fair points.
Yeah, very fair points. Very measured points, Anthony. Thank you.
Very measured. What do you make of? I think John Cooper talked about the power play last night in his press conference, and he basically was like, "Look, you're coming along at 25% for most of the year. You're doing pretty good. Mm-hmm. That's one out of every 4 opportunities you're going to succeed." And so he made it seem like maybe it wasn't a big deal. Again, I mean, that's coming from the head coach.
Yeah. Well, it's been 5 games now. They haven't had Brandon Hagel on the top unit.
And I get that, right? That's a big deal. Anchor says, still don't think these games matter. Even Dave Andrechuk said on the podcast he doesn't believe teams can just turn it on come playoffs. Wouldn't you rather play Boston in round 1 and let Montreal and Buffalo fight it out? Saying these games don't matter is a cop-out.
Yeah, and Anchor had 2 other posts that Steve filled us in on. Them? Well, I mean, they were all kind of along the same lines. I think 1 was sent before the game, and then 2 were sent after the game. So Andrechuk did say, Anchor is correct, Andrechuk did say he was on teams that did not play well down the stretch in the regular season and then lost in the first round. Notably, he was on a New Jersey team. I think they won their division. I don't know that they were the 1 seed overall in the East, but they played Ottawa in the first round and lost. He also said, though, this is an experienced playoff team. So he's like, I don't know how much it matters to this team. Of course, those Devils teams in the late 90s that he was playing on were also pretty experienced. I mean, a lot of those players had won a cup in 95. So it can happen. I think you and I, Greg, are not discounting the fact that if your game goes off the rails and you just cannot get it reeled back in when the playoffs begin, you could lose.
For sure.
I don't think the Lightning's game has gone off the rails, though, for weeks and weeks and weeks. Like, again, they had a stretch of 11 games where they got points in 10. Yeah. It's been since they clinched the playoff spot that I think their emotional level has gone down. They're almost like taking a breath to get ready for the playoffs. And as you take a breath, other teams are, maybe they're taking a little bit of a breath too, because Buffalo and Montreal have clinched a playoff spot as well. But, let's be honest, those teams had a little bit more at stake. Just they were playing at home. The crowd was amped up. We had the Caulfield, element last night. Buffalo had the rematch with the Lightning. There was that in the Monday game. Ottawa had a lot to play for on Tuesday, and, the Sens have really helped themselves, winning 3 in a row. They have the inside track, certainly, to grab a wild card spot of the teams that are battling for the wild card, and the Lightning have just been like, we clinched our playoff spot, right? So I think that there's some of that. This is what I will say. We cannot assume that one matchup is better than another. We can't. Anchor, you cannot presume that this year in the East. I mean, you can.
What do you mean?
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Do I think there is a difference between facing in the West Colorado in the first round and, I mean, look, if Edmonton or Vegas gets the division, that may prove to be a pretty tricky first round matchup for the other wild card team, which probably is going to be Utah. But Colorado has been like a behemoth this year. Is there one team in the East that's been a behemoth? The Boston Bruins are going to make the playoffs because they've had a very, very good year. Are they in a little bit of a rut right now? Yeah, they are. Does that mean that they're going to stay in a rut when the playoffs begin? Not necessarily. We've talked, Andrechuk himself said, I am concerned as a Sabres alum and somebody who holds that organization close to his heart. He's like, I am concerned if the Sabres have to start at home. I would rather have the Sabres start on the road.
Yeah.
So, Buffalo's playing really well right now. But what is this going to matter when the playoffs start? So when you're looking at, wouldn't you rather play Boston and have Montreal and Buffalo duke it out? This is different than the Central. We know Dallas and Minnesota are going to be duking it out. Colorado is going to get, objectively, a weaker team in the first round by finishing first in that division. The East, I don't know that it really matters 1 through 8. I mean, yeah, Carolina may end up winning the conference, I should say, and they're on a roll right now. But you get that second wild card. Like, there are a lot of teams that are a little nervous about seeing Ottawa. We talked about how well Ottawa's played. Up until they hit a rut, Columbus was looking dangerous. So I don't know. I mean,
aren't you
I think
nervous?
Predicting these first-round matchups and saying this is going to be a better matchup than that, like, I just don't think that is predictive. I don't. In this situation, this year in the East.
I guess, look, I understand fans are going to look at this, probably the players internally, and so does the coaching staff and general manager look at certain matchups and say, I think the numbers tell us analytically, and then maybe the eye test, we match up better with that team than others. But I think because of the parity in today's game, this is designed to have every round be very tough, and it really doesn't matter who you play. So I think the Lightning playing Buffalo, playing Montreal, or playing Boston is going to be a tough game or a tough series.
Yeah, it is.
I do. I mean, do I think the Lightning will be favored in all of those? I wouldn't be surprised if yes, they would be. Does that mean anything? No.
Mm-hmm.
And if those series go 7 games, if the series goes 7 games, would you be surprised? No. So I think I understand the early round exits. I do. And there are people who say, okay, you guys keep talking about this is a team who will turn it on once the playoffs begin. They've had early exits recently. Who cares about the playoff experience? It doesn't mean a lick. Take a look at the last 3 years. Fine. You want to do that? That's great. But I don't think how the team finished those years they had early round exits was necessarily why they lost in the first round, is what I'm saying.
Show me a first round matchup in which the Lightning lost in the first round, in which the Lightning stumbled down the stretch and got a quote-unquote less advantageous opponent.
Yeah.
I was talking about this with Steve. I would go all the way back to 2006. I think it happened then.
That's a long time.
The Lightning, yeah, that's going back a ways. The Lightning, for sure they lost their last game. And because they lost their last game, and it was a home game, I do remember this. It was a home game against Washington, which missed the playoffs that year. It was Ovechkin's rookie year.
Yeah.
But they ended up drafting Nicholas Backstrom out of that bad year. I think they had the 4th overall pick. So the Caps had a back-to-back home on one night, at Tampa the next.
Yeah.
And the Lightning were home waiting for Washington. And had they won that game, they would not have finished 8th, and they would have avoided Ottawa, which was the 1 seed that year. They would have avoided Ottawa in the first round. They would have gotten a different opponent. Ottawa did end up losing that year to Buffalo in the second round, but it was a bit of an upset. That is an instance where they lost the last game, and it got them the top team as a result. That is a very specific example of a situation in which, and that wasn't even a stumble down the stretch, that was game 82, okay? You want to look at these last 3 years where they've gone out in the first round. They finished last season well. And no matter what they did down the stretch, they weren't avoiding a matchup with Florida. Toronto was winning the division last year. They were playing the Panthers in the first round, okay? The year before, they were playing the Panthers in the first round again. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the way it was going to turn out. They were going to finish 3rd.
Right.
Go back the year before that. That was the year Boston won 65. They weren't winning the division. They were going to play Toronto in the first round.
Yeah.
So no matter what happened down the stretch, and I think that they've actually finished okay the last 3 years, it's more about, like we've talked about, the injuries that they've gotten the last 2 years, certainly in the closing games of the regular season that affected them. And also their opponent the last 2 years won the Stanley Cup, which, we have to take that into account.
You can't minimize that.
I don't believe this narrative about the Lightning, this Lightning team, has a history of stumbling down the stretch and tumbling into a quote-unquote worse matchup. That's not why they've lost in the first round the last 3 years. They've gotten a tough matchup in the last 3 years, but it's not related to some kind of like fumbling of the ball where they would have had a quote-unquote better matchup, but they fumbled the ball and they got a worse matchup. They were pretty much locked into these matchups the last 3 years. And to your point, last 2 years, certainly they ran into just a team that beat them, that was better. I think that they could have beaten Toronto in 2023. As we've talked about, Toronto made all the big plays.
Yeah.
3 overtime wins in Tampa.
3 overtime wins.
Yeah, I mean, like rallying in 2 of the games. I mean, they just made big play after big play after big play, but the Lightning actually carried play for much of that series as the lower seed. They were the lower seed in that series.
And you could have also said Toronto might have just been due.
Toronto was due.
I mean, that's
fair.
Yeah. They had a good core. At some point, that talented team was going to move beyond the first round.
And Toronto probably, I've said this. I think Toronto actually outplayed the Lightning in 2022. Yeah, the Lightning won that series. Right. Yeah, they won Game 6 in overtime. The one overtime win. I was doing the math in my head. They've actually lost 11 of their last 12 overtime games.
The home game.
I thought it was 10 of 11. Huge. That one, though, was Game 6 in 2022 that got the series extended to Game 7.
And this home, the home losing needs
the
to
home
stop.
losing,
to your point. That is something we will keep an eye on. I mean, that can't happen. Look, I'll meet some people halfway. You want to start talking about in the playoffs, what you got to start doing. Yeah, I get it. That needs to change.
What's been weird about this whole end of season narrative, when the Lightning have lost in the first round, they've actually finished the season okay, regular season. 2014, I mentioned they won their last 4 games and leapfrogged Montreal into second and then got swept. 2019, they won 62. They finished well. They wanted to get to 62. They did. They got swept by Columbus in the first round. The last 3 years, I don't have the stats in front of me, but they weren't finishing, I think, like 3-7-1, and like they were going to finish first, and they ended up finishing third, and they got Toronto in the first round as a result. That wasn't going to happen in 2023. The Bruins won 65 games.
Yeah.
They were getting first place.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
I think to your point, and we'll get to some more questions, injuries also play a role in how this plays out. It really does. And look, again, people, I think we have to understand the NHL, more than any other time in its existence, is set up where you do have a lot of different things happening because of the parity in today's game. So every matchup in that first round is going to be a tough one. Maybe 25 years ago, that wasn't the case. That team that snuck in as the 8th seed really was limping in.
Mm-hmm.
And you could go to town, go to work. Remember when San Jose beat Detroit the one year?
Yep,
Kevin Constantine was the head coach.
Huge upset.
Yep. That didn't happen a lot. That was what we would say is unusual. But, for the most part, whoever you play in the first round, it's going to be difficult. From Al, what has happened to the point we know and love? His skating has not been the same since his knee injury. He doesn't seem to be focused or confident with the puck.
Well, things are not happening for him offensively. There was one play in the third period. He intercepted a puck. He was right in the middle of the ice and hesitated an instant, and Dobson got in the way and blocked the shot. Maroon was like, that's the way it's going for Braden Point right now. I'm not sure his skating has been affected. Like, he's had some games. Maybe Al is talking about when he got hurt in Philly, because prior to that, he was definitely flying. But I think even since he came back after the Olympic break, he's had some games where his motor's really going. Fresh start in the playoffs.
That's how you have to look at it.
But look, they're going to need him. They are going to need him to be the engine of this team and to score big goals. When the Lightning have had playoff success with Braden Point on their team, he has scored big goals.
So you don't want to put too much on one player. However, Braden Point, because of the player he is, I think just naturally is going to bring that upon himself. Mm-hmm. You're a 40-goal scorer in this league. You're somebody who's Team Canada. Obviously when healthy, you're considered, partner, it's not a stretch to say he's one of the elite players when healthy in the NHL. I think it's fair to say. If you want to say this year he hasn't been, that's fine. Understand this. If Braden Point doesn't get back to his level that we're used to seeing, and preferably it starts soon, and let's say in the playoffs, to me that will be a bigger reason the Lightning fall in the first round than them stumbling late in the regular season. Now, maybe you want to say both of those are related. In other words, if Point was humming along, would it have an impact on how the Lightning are playing collectively? Let's just call it the last 10 days, 2 weeks of the regular season. Maybe. But I do know if your best players aren't your best players in the postseason for the most part, I don't care how well you finished or how much you struggled at the end of the regular season. I think it's going to be tough. So, again, I'll meet the fans halfway, and maybe it's too much that I'm putting on Braden Point, but I'm doing it because I think history has shown his career at this point in the NHL has been very good, and I think I've even made the reference. It's Hall of Fame trajectory. When you take a look at just where he's been far from that this year.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't get back to where he's been, I do think that is a bigger concern than the Lightning stumbling the last week or two of the regular season. I think that's fair to say because he's one of your best players.
But Al's question was about Point. It wasn't about stumbling in the last.
No, that's what I mean. Like, I think a bigger concern, Al, for me is, I think we're touching on it here. Is that I do think that Braden Point getting back on track come playoff time has to happen. It has to happen.
And look, it's not like he's generating no chances. I mean, just on this road trip alone, he's gotten loose in front of the opposing goalie not once but twice and basically bashed into the goalie both times. I mean,
and he had a power move last night,
Samuelsson pushed him, but I mean, he was behind Samuelsson, and the one last night, he got the goalie interference penalty, and it did look like, was it Matheson? I think Matheson.
It was Matheson because Matheson nailed him at the
push.
end, too.
Yeah, a little push, right. And Point got the penalty there, but the fact that Point was there tells you like he was around the net.
It's just been an off year for him.
Things aren't happening for him.
And does that happen? Yeah, it can. I mean, there have been a lot of players where it's unusual for him because I think Braden Point, he's not like Nikita Kucherov, Dave, where he can just roll out of bed and he has a 3-point night. But I think even in a year where he doesn't have it going on, he's still a 30-goal scorer because I think his speed generates so much. And he's usually pretty dynamic on the power play.
Yeah.
And whether it's injuries or whether it's just been an off year for him this year, that hasn't happened. Again, this is where we talk about the reset, not only for the team, but certainly individuals. Braden Point being one of them. Bjorkstrand being another one. One of the X factors was Victor Hedman. If and when he comes back, we felt like, okay, reset for the postseason. Doesn't matter what you did in the regular season. Nobody really cares. If you end up going 17 games in the playoffs and have 8 goals and 7 assists, people are going to be like, that's what I'm talking about. So, to me, Al, your question might be a little bit different. Look what's happened to Braden Point. You'd have to ask Braden Point. I think he's actually been asked that question. I think it's just been a little bit of an off year for him. The good news and the hope, and maybe this is hope, that when the playoffs start, Braden Point can reset and he will get back to the numbers that suggest he is a 35 to 40 goal scorer in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I know that's probably not what you want to hear. That's the best I can give you. If people want to respond, they can at Bolts Radio. I think we had another question from Jim, our good friend. And this was from Wednesday's show, partner. We never got to it. He said an amazing stat. In their most recent games combined, the Islanders, the Red Wings, and Blue Jackets are 2-14-1. That's including the Columbus win over the Red Wings on Tuesday night, so keep in mind things have changed a little bit.
Yeah, because Detroit and the Islanders both won last night.
He said, trust me, Lightning fans, things aren't so bad here with the start of the road trip, even with the only back-to-back regulation losses of the season. So Jim trying to bring perspective.
What do you mean the only back-to-back regulation losses of the season? The Lightning have had more than one set of back-to-back regulation. Oh, he means in a back-to-back. That's true. The Lightning had a great record in back-to-backs this year.
Correct.
So here's a way of looking at it, Greg. If we had said going into the regular season, or even after this is kind of slanted to say after they were 1-4-2 when we had said, the Lightning are going to make the playoffs. Take it or leave it. Everybody would say take it, right? What more do you want from the regular season? That's kind of the question. Coop's point is the point of the regular season is to make the playoffs.
Correct.
The point of the regular season is to be one of those 16 teams that gets to compete for the Stanley Cup. Now, it's the GM's job and the coach's job to see how the ship is running, right? Like, how's that engine humming along? How are you getting to the point where you are accumulating enough points to make the playoffs? But if we had asked fans heading into game one, we're going to give it to you right now, the Lightning are making the playoffs, fans would say, yes, I'm going to take it. Oh, and by the way, they're not going to finish in the last 3 to 4 games of the regular season particularly well. Would you still take that? I think most fans would say yes. Do you think it matters if we're going to tell you right now the Lightning are making the playoffs, but they may have a stumble down the stretch in the regular season, but they're still going to get into the playoffs? How concerned are you? That's taking the 30,000-foot view, and some fans might be like, well, I'd rather have them play well going to the playoffs, but some fans would be like, they'll be fine. Just they're in the playoffs, right? Particularly given the intense schedule, the 27 games in 50 days. I think it is understandable that once they clinched, they're like, for the regular season and the regular season only, we have accomplished our goal. Even though we want to keep playing well, even though we still want to get points, they're competitors, they're athletes. Like, they do want to win, they want to play well.
Would agree.
But the reality is that I think that they have exhaled, and their emotional level has dropped. Because they were pushing. They had that stumble out of the Olympic break. They had to pull it back together. They did. They delivered an 11-game stretch in which they got points in 10 and clinched a playoff spot. Exhale. That's what we've seen.
Let's get to a few more questions here. I do have some on X that started to pop up. And look at me going X and not...
Yes.
And not Twitter. This one came from Anchor Network Solutions.
I think that was the one we were talking about.
Is that Anchor? That's right. No,
yeah.
That was Anchor.
This may be a different one, though.
No. Hope you will address this in pre-record tomorrow. Obviously, this was from yesterday.
Yeah.
Every year we say these games don't matter, and every year we get bad matchups and bounce. Wouldn't you rather play Boston in the round one and let Buffalo and Habs duke it out? I mean, that's
so. I think I addressed that. I think
you
that
definitely addressed that.
This every year we get bad matchups, every year we stumble is just not true. I mean, they've gotten tough matchups the last few years, but this every year we stumble, I don't think is consistent with their playoff success or lack thereof. And again, we can go back. I'm not going to do it, but maybe somebody will do it for us. And look, we want to say the last 10 games. Look at the last 10 games of a regular season and what the team did in the playoffs that year. The 2020 year was weird because we had the break. They won the cup that year, but I know they finished 3-6-1 before we paused the season. They did not finish particularly well in 2021. They won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about 2004, which is going back, a ways. I mean, I think they finished okay, but they weren't clicking on all cylinders like they were for much of the second half of the year. 2014, they finished the season with 4 straight wins. Lost 4 straight. So, again, I take exception to Not to the tough matchup part. They have had tough matchups, but usually you're going to see a tough matchup in the playoffs.
Yeah, that part.
I think to me, and I've said this many times, I know recently even, you need to reach a certain level in the playoffs. If you don't reach that level, you are more likely to lose than win. And it matters.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't matter who your opponent is. I mean, it does, because if your opponent is also not reaching that higher level, then just this, you can't expect that, but sometimes that does happen. Last year and the year before, the Lightning were not at the same level as the Panthers, and they got beat. I think it had less to do with what happened in terms of their play down the stretch in the regular season. Injuries are a different matter. And unfortunately this year they have had a significant injury in the last couple of weeks of the regular season again. But that can't be controlled.
No, it can't be. Let me get to this read. One more question, then we're bouncing. Tonight, enjoy some Reif Rum, smooth, versatile, now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Reif Rum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Reif Rum by name. Go Bolts. Enjoy responsibly. Al says, I'm concerned that these 6D men are getting worn out. They've played a lot of hard minutes since the Olympics because the forwards don't always help in the D zone. They look tired and are making uncharacteristic mental mistakes. That was from a couple of days ago, by the way, just so we're clear.
I disagree, Al. I disagree. I mean, I don't think that they are. The Lightning don't have a guy who plays 26, 27 minutes a game on defense. I think they're playing the same that they've always played. And I mean, some of their guys have had injuries this year, so they haven't had the wear and tear of playing all 82.
Tim says Bolts can't seem to win these important games. I fear playoff wins will be a fast exit again.
So important games. How important are these games? They are important if you're, looking at seeding. They are far less important than playoff games. This is kind of the same thing wrapped up in kind of a different package, but inside the package is the same question. How important are these games down the stretch? How predictive are they for playoff success or lack thereof? And we're going to find out. I mean, we have definitely accumulated a lot of material for subsequent seasons if we keep doing this show, which I hope we do. And we will look back at this little stretch, some future end of regular season, and be like, Greg and I were talking until we were blue in the face that the end of the regular season didn't matter. The Lightning weren't playing well. And look what happened in the playoff series, A or B. And we'll say we were completely vindicated or we were completely wrong, right? Or maybe neither. They were just like, they lost in the first round, but it wasn't due to, as you pointed out earlier today, what happened late in the regular season. But it's definitely provided a lot of spirited discussion during this road trip as the Lightning have gone 0-3. Hopefully they can pick up a win tomorrow. The Bruins may fall into the second wild card. Ottawa is only 2 points back with the tiebreak. Both teams have 3 games left. Now, for the Bruins, there's like, we just want to get in, right? But
I would agree.
They have not gotten an X yet. Although I want to say, as we are about to sign off, the Bruins are at 96, and the Red Wings have a max total of, they have 3 games left, so that's 6 points, 97. So if the Bruins get 2 points, they will clinch. 1 point may not get it done because they might potentially lose a tiebreaker. So they are very close. They need 1 win in their last 3 or a little bit of help where Detroit loses or one of these other teams that's in the 9-10 area would lose. Their easiest path, though, is to pick up 2 points. So they, I think, are going to get in. I think it's unclear if they're in wild card 1 or wild card 2 at this point, though. So again, the Lightning are facing a team with way more at stake than them tomorrow afternoon. We may see the debut of James Hagens, too, who is a first-round pick of the Bruins, who finished his college career and has been playing in Providence, and they called him up. So they may pop him in the lineup, which would be exciting for him.
Well, partner, enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah, you too.
And I will talk to you tomorrow afternoon.
Yes, right? And then we're back at it
yeah.
Monday before Lightning Red Wings at Benchmark
International
Arena. Yep.
Should be a lot of fun. All right, partner. Great job as always.
You too.
And we'll hear you with Patty tomorrow afternoon. Thanks to Steve Versnick, who produced. Thanks to all our guests who joined us this week. And, of course, you guys for listening. We always appreciate it. Keep those questions coming in. We're not afraid to address them.
No,
we love doing it. We love doing that. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch right here on Lightning Radio.